Well, hello, friends. Here we are, and we are going to be working on an abstract portrait. And so, how I'm going to do that is, God, I don't know. This was really experimental. I wanted to do something loose because I haven't been doing something loose in a while. I've been doing this goddess series, and I've been really working with a lot of sketching and planning, and I wanted to do something that didn't have a lot of planning. So I'm trying to create an atmospheric background, something that's really abstract, kind of cloudy, and so I'm using high flow acrylics by Golden and some acrylic inks. And I have titanium buff, shading gray, and the acrylic ink that I'm using is a transparent burnt sienna. And I'm just using a catalyst wedge to move it around and a lot of water and create some drips, see what happens. But I want to have a really light base coat to work with first, because I find that whenever you're doing any kind of portrait which is in acrylic entirely, then you do want to work in layers, because layers are what's going to create your depth and dimension in your painting. Whereas if you use oil paints, oil paints are the king of depth and dimension, if you ask me. Okay, so I don't have something to blow air aside from a straw, and I don't recommend. Luckily, I do have a pretty good lung capacity, but you do get a little bit lightheaded doing this. So if you have something that blows air and you can kind of blow your acrylic inks around, I didn't want to have these dripping all over the canvas. I kind of wanted to have them localized and do some cool designs and work with a little bit. I love how that blooms out like that titanium buff when you put it into the acrylic ink, because that's a magenta, and I used a phthalo turquoise on the top, and then adding a little bit of that transparent burnt sienna mixed with some of that titanium buff, which kind of creates this really cool, like, colorful cloudy effect. Something whimsical is in the air. And that's, again, more of the phthalo turquoise at the bottom and just mixing it with water to see where it goes. Once that's completely dry, then I'm going to start adding some more high viscosity acrylics. And I started out using a catalyst wedge, but I was like, nah, that's too thick. I want it to be a little bit more cloudy and have kind of that mystical feel to it, or this cloudy effect. So these foam rollers that you can just buy at Hobby Lobby, they're wicked cheap, and they do the job. They make it look really nice and kind of cloudy, but in a very abstract way where you don't have to spend a lot of time doing that. And then we go into the actual first layer of the portrait. So I'm using that shading gray, and I have actually mixed it with a little bit of that transparent burnt sienna, kind of keeping with the same color scheme and the colors that I've already used anyway, because I don't want to just like right off the bat go way out of the box with colors. I want to kind of stick to the same color palette that I started out using. So just kind of outlining where I want the face to be and doing it with a very, very transparent. The more water you add to it, obviously, the more transparent it becomes. But I kind of just want to outline where I want the face to be. And I decided that I wanted to do more of an asymmetrical painting as opposed to putting the subject right in the center of the canvas. So kind of mapping out the face, you'll see like halfway through this painting, the eyes are not like totally equal. They're like, one is higher than the other, and I didn't realize it until halfway through the painting. But that's what happens when you don't really do like a detailed sketch, or you don't transfer your sketch onto your canvas. Is going to be a little bit wonky sometimes, but I just wanted to do something that was really kind of freestyle, and I do adjust it during the painting process. But continuing to kind of build up the shadows, and then what I'll end up doing is putting in some of the highlights of the face so that I know where I'm going to go and where the light source is coming from. And it's kind of coming from above, that shadow that you get from the nose. So it's like the light source is coming at an angle from above. And once you know the lighting situation, it's a lot easier to kind of build up the shadows and the highlights on the face. So I do want to do one of my favorite things, which is birds and birds of a feather. We stick together. So we've got, so I don't know why I said that. So I kind of sketched in like some feathers and everything in the bird. And now what I'm doing is I'm going in with some black, but I'm barely touching the canvas because I do want to have some of those acrylic inks show through, and I don't want it to be really blocky. I find that when you're doing a portrait in strictly acrylics, if you have really blocky parts of your painting without any of your other layers showing through, it ends up looking really flat and lacking in dimension. So I do want parts of this painting to have the base layers showing through, and kind of going with this very abstract way of creating a portrait. There will be some of the parts that will have more detail and more definition in them, but other parts I do want to have very abstract. So going in here with the background, I felt like it needed a little bit more color, and just to continue on with a lot of that misty, cloudy, atmospheric background, so that you don't have a blank background, but you have something kind of interesting. And then on the other side, I wanted to do a lot of palette knife work and have some more textures that are introduced with the palette knife. And the palette knife is great because you don't have a ton of control, but you have enough control where you can kind of have the direction where you want the colors to go. And once that layer dries, you can always go over it with the palette knife again and get some really cool effects, like I'm doing here with the black, and then adding some lines and kind of overlapping. I don't want there to be like a ton of definition, just kind of giving the impression of things. There's my first abstract feather on this painting, and I wanted to have a really vibrant color, so I used bright aqua green by Liquitex, and I mixed in a little bit of teal. And in order to have that kind of contrast, cadmium orange by Liquitex, which I like better than the golden. I feel like it's not as dark, it's a little bit more vibrant, and I don't know. I like the cadmium orange by Liquitex better. So those like black fingers that look like they're coming out are actually like just kind of more of that abstract feather. And then adding a little bit of paint splatter to it also just kind of adds a little bit of that abstraction as well. So the bird, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with the bird, and so I kind of left that towards the end. But now with the skin tones, I've moved on to golden open acrylics, and the color palette that I used to create the skin tones with the golden open acrylics is I use cadmium red, cadmium yellow, yellow ochre, ultramarine blue, and white, and a little bit of black where I needed to gray down some of the darker tones. Okay, so it was around this point where I realized that the eyes are not totally even, and I think it was the 80s blue eyeshadow that I had applied that made me see it. So I did make a couple of just minor adjustments to that at some point and fix that problem. But as far as the rest of the face goes, I just continue layering brushstroke next to brushstroke with color, and that helps the acrylics actually look a little bit more like an oil painting. And what I mean by that is not blending all of your colors together and more stacking your brushstrokes next to each other with different colors on them, and it gives it more of a realistic effect. So going on with a little bit of that abstraction up there on that feather, and then coming down to the bird. So with bird feathers, I found the easiest way to paint bird feathers is to use a flat brush and have it kind of at an angle and just kind of lightly kiss the canvas, and it gives the illusion of fluffiness with the feathers. So that's what I did with the bird, and I don't know what kind of bird I was painting. I just, I was winging it. Get it? Oh, terrible joke. All right. So once again, that big blob, that big black blob kind of in the center of the canvas, I really was like, wow, I really don't know what to do with this. So I just kind of put a bunch of lines in there, like it was a bunch of feathers just kind of coming up the side of her neck, and that seemed to work out all right. I'm not sure that I won't go back and kind of fix a couple of things on the painting, mainly because as acrylics dry, they do change color a little bit, so there might be a couple of minor adjustments that need to be made with the colors. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this abstract portrait, and I will see you next time. I love you guys. Oh, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe if you haven't already subscribed. And please leave questions in the comments if you have any. All right, I'll see you next time. Bye.